Start recording. Looks like it's working. Say something.
Hello.
Okay, just turn you down a bit. Try again.
Hello, hello.
Okay, looks good.
Cool.
Okay, so what did you do since last time?
So not nearly as much as I wanted. I did have just. I should probably find this. I created a list of things that just in terms of I was just thinking about that yesterday. But I've had 2 days where I've been I don't know, fairly demotivated, I guess is sort of the thing, or not feeling particularly great. Anyway, so
any idea what happened there? Were you tired? Is there is something hard, so you're getting stuck on it?
Some of it's sort of tiredness related. I think on Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, I went to sleep at like 4 o'clock or something crazy, as in it was a few hours after the tutorial, and I just sort of was very tired. Yesterday was way more general. Yeah. So, and then slept for 12 plus hours.
Oh, yeah, that sounds overly tired.
Yeah, yesterday was more just sort of not feeling very good about, I don't know, either myself or everything, or I don't know. It was hard to feel motivated about anything, so I went to sleep quite early again so that I didn't sort of like waste time.
Yeah. I find sleep helps a lot with being able to be intellectually productive.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much
I write a lot. I sometimes take naps. I find they're the best way to recover and be able to do a second writing session later in the day.
Yep. It's something I've sort of considered. I've not been very good at napping though, in the sense that I tend to sleep a long time, and then it takes me a bit to come out of it. So I feel like there's a lot of overhead. So I haven't practiced like napping properly. But yeah. Anyway, so I meant to add that to this little list of things that I've been sort of collecting as potential topics and stuff for us to talk about. So I did manage to spend some time and do the article on the Constitution thing.
Okay.
That said, I finished it like 15 minutes ago. So I haven't gone through and like actually edited it and things like that I would normally do. So that's maybe a thing. Also, oh yeah, and I wrote this other thing the other night, which I posted to FI, asking for feedback. I've asked a few people in like IRL friends for feedback as well. So there's...
Okay, I haven't read that yet. I've been pretty busy.
No worries. Yeah, so I think Justin and Anne provided some feedback to this one. But this was sort of a little bit interesting as well, in that I wrote this like quite late at night. I sort of found I couldn't sleep, and then it was like, yeah, after midnight, before 1 a.m. sort of thing. I've edited it a few times and stuff, but it's quite a different mindset to the Constitution one, which is only been like in the morning, or only in the morning, I think.
Okay, can you send me a link to that stuff?
Yep.
In Tutoring. I don't want to show DMs.
Yep. No, that's cool. That was just what I had up, so there we go. So that's the one that I just finished.
Okay, which one would you rather look at first?
Well, this one's going to be really fresh in my mind, but that's maybe not the best. The other one I've had sort of been sitting around for a few days. and have done some more work on. So
Fresh is probably good.
okay, let's start with that. So we went over the the sort of plan that I constructed for this.
Yeah.
I didn't end up sticking exactly to the order because a lot of it was stuff that could be moved around.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Okay, so some is an unnecessary modifier. Doesn't add anything significant. So also vary. For modifiers, you want to consider if there is some sort of important reason to have it. It's a little bit like decisive arguments, first degree arguments, where you want some sort of goal. You're arguing why a goal is satisfied or not satisfied. It's a little similar where this has to add some specific thing to be worth using a modifier. There has to be a clear reason that you need the modifier instead of no modifier.
Yep. I have started doing that. Like that's one thing that I'm not sure how long ago I started, but I've definitely like tried to pay more attention to that. We might notice it more in the other article since I've edited that a few times.
Probably can drop the also as well. I'd definitely write that right here. Implication that it's
Yep.
it's so you can drop that fairly often, and this is one of the cases where it's less clear than average. Like if you drop that after I think, it's usually okay, but this one's a little bit confusing.
If I read it like and includes the implication any elected, it flows really weirdly, whereas that makes it
Yeah. Okay, the overall, this is an introductory paragraph, and it does a reasonable job of telling us what the topic is, or it seems like it does. I haven't seen what the rest actually says, but yeah, it seems like it works to inform the reader what they're going to be told, so they know what they're reading and what to look for later.
Yeah, the one thing that I would like, the major argument isn't directly introduced there though, so I'm not sure if that's bad.
Oh, yeah, that's... So the paragraph isn't too long, so you could probably just add an extra sentence.
One thing that I like, I'm not sure exactly where the tendency comes from, but I have this this tendency to like what I was sort of just going to write automatically there was like, as we'll see, this isn't the extent of the problems or something like that. I feel like it's less good and more wordy when I write stuff like that. Like, as we'll see is not really necessary.
Yeah. Right. I was expecting a sentence giving information about what the main point is, rather than saying that there's missing info. I just tell them some of the info.
Yep.
Yeah, I like to try to give previews that are interesting in their own right, instead of when you say, also there's more info later. That sentence is like boring on its own. It's only setting up a promise for later, so I try not to do that unless it's really important, like, because it would be misleading without it.
So something like, So something like elected officials are also required to swear allegiance to a foreign power, which disqualifies them from holding office. So something like that
Yeah,
better?
I'd probably mention who the foreign power is in parentheses.
Yep.
Because then it'll only add a few words and make it a significantly clearer preview where people have more idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay. So Queen Elizabeth II, which for anyone who's familiar with Australia, probably,
Yeah, they
like at that
ultimately
point, will get them thinking.
understand now the rough idea.
Yep. Obviously, is just thinking about the next like sentence on or the
Yeah, I
next.
don't like that word in general.
Neither do I. It's a. I feel like it's always a crutch word.
So,
Um,
of the following interpretations can be shortened to say my interpretations or these minor things. I want to try and
yep.
focus on the main points. Let's see. Alright, so this next sentence is a bit wordy. I read part of it already, but so I got to the first half. It's clear so far. Like I didn't have trouble understanding it, so that's good. Weakens the law because it becomes less clear when and how to apply it. Yeah, that gets the point across. Lack of consistency means boundaries between times are blurred. That's a little redundant with the previous point. Okay, so you're bringing up this concept of boundaries as a keyword, and that's the thing you're adding that's new information compared to what you already told them is related to boundaries, or it appears to be related to boundaries. But you don't explain what you mean by boundaries or why that's a key concept. So this part I would call unclear.
Okay.
Because it seems like you want to say something like specific about boundaries, but it's not coming across.
Yeah. So I guess so times. I mean, this might. Sorry, excuse me for tick. Where I say like means the boundaries between times we should or shouldn't apply aspects of the law. Like, I didn't like this sentence, well, particularly the times sort of word is. Yeah, it doesn't fit well, and it doesn't.
Yeah, you mean like
Like it's.
instances, but you're trying not to use a weird computer word?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to keep language as simple as possible. Like, one of the uh, phrases that sort of came up in the other article was like, um, compromising acknowledges their inadequacies or something like that. Like that's a really it's far more complex than it needs. Yeah, it might be small in terms of the number of words, but it's like the words take a lot more thinking about.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So I'm trying to avoid that.
Yeah, a good word for times is scenarios. That's one that people are very familiar with. They should be able to understand.
So I could say like this lack of consistency also means the scenarios where we should or shouldn't apply aspects of the law are unclear.
Yeah, so your point is it's hard to make a distinction. So there's gray area scenarios, is I think the point. The boundary isn't clear, so there's a gray area where it's hard to tell which way it should go.
Yeah, it's the complete idea in my head is like for people to comply with the law, they need to know when it does or doesn't apply, or when
Yeah.
and what it does and doesn't entail. And so if this is like unclear and inexplicit, like maybe it'll be the case that we'll get explicit ideas through common law or whatever else, but it means that people are in this like dangerous situation to start with. It's a risk sort of thing.
Yeah, another way to talk about that is the unpredictability. The inconsistency makes it hard for people to predict which actions will be legal or illegal.
Yeah, I'll just make a note here for later as opposed to trying to fix it up too much.
Okay. And I read the final sentence and it was pretty clear. I think it gets the main idea across. So.
Yep.
Wait, I can't highlight. Is that a GitHub thing? Oh, now I can. That was, okay, it's probably a Mac bug. All right, section of Constitution. Relevant. This article is. Yeah, this is overly wordy, but it's clear enough.
I sort of Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that, but because it's like a topic sentence and I feel like I'm constraining it. Like it's just a sort of, it's better to be clear than not clear here. And also to get all of the various points like without sort of being ambiguous. I feel like it's more important in this sentence than other sentences as such. Is
Yeah,
why
well,
I
if you say
sort of chose
the
that.
relevant section of the Constitution is Section 44, I think it's clear enough.
Yeah, okay.
It's the to this article and then the need for a that.
I think what might have happened, I'm trying to remember, but I think what might have happened is I wrote something and then expanded on it without like reorganizing. Like, so if relevant was in the second half, then it's easier to add the other words, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of problems come from editing. So it's very similar to mutable state bugs in programming, where when you first write the function, it's reasonably consistent and planned out and makes sense. Then when people go back and modify things, then they don't keep everything consistent. So when you edit,
Yep.
yeah, a lot you got like mixed versions of the sentence together.
I've had a few, issues like that from time to time.
Yeah, me too. If it's important, you can be careful every time you edit a sentence. You can like review it if you really want to make sure everything works out well.
Yep. I find then they're usually not too bad in terms of people can sort of pick up that there's like I had one example from the other day was and have, I think, in terms of it was, or they have and have blah, which I
Yeah.
just cut part of the sentence out and then, but it was pretty obvious what I was trying to get at, so I don't worry about them too much.
Yeah,
At least not
in
on a.
informal context, people will just ignore that kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay, so this one's wordy in a way that's pretty important. So you have there were. So your verb is were, and then you have who, which is a relative pronoun, and then you make modifier, right? You're making this
Yep.
modifier clause. So you want to look to use active verbs when possible and have fewer clauses. So you delete these, put a comma, and delete that, and you have make the main grammatical core of the sentence be parliamentarians resigned. So parliamentarians are the subject and resigned is the verb. And that
Yep.
puts the core point of the sentence into the core grammar words instead of putting a main point in a subclause.
Yep. I feel like phrases like falling afoul are a little bit like they're overly fancy.
Oh, yeah, that I agree.
And I feel like the sentence itself was one of those things that people do to sort of pad out their,
Yeah, you
sort of
could
pad
just
things out and make
literally
it sound
delete
more.
it in this case. And the sentence still works.
Yep. Yeah.
Various is unnecessary. It doesn't help because it's not adding a useful detail.
Yeah, no, I think as well, the various issues, all of the issues that actually mattered, like all of the cases where people resigned were all actually the same instance of things, which was dual citizenship that they didn't know about.
Even if there was a
So,
variety, it wouldn't be a surprising fact. So calling something various is mostly useful when people would expect it not to be various.
yeah.
Mentioning that there's 5 cases might be unnecessary, but it's not that big a deal. Alright, so then you quote the case, then you created an outline to make it easier to understand.
I put in the notation stuff just because Like,
Yeah,
obviously we know what it is, but yeah.
Okay, for this, if you want this to be for a general audience, for the public, do not use single letter variables. People have trouble with those, especially for like doing all the substitutions mentally. People have a much easier time understanding this if you use descriptive variable names
Yeah.
or just phrases, entire phrases in brackets.
Yeah. But I could say like condition 1 to like,
Yes,
foreign
condition
nations
one
or
is
something like.
descriptive, and that one people will be able to remember what it is in a more reasonable way.
Yep. And I mean, I think there's only one condition. The other two are nouns. So it's sort of condition 1 makes it nicer to think about though, because it's obvious that it's a name as opposed to like the general thing or whatever else.
Okay, then analyzing it. I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Pretty technical, but it is an issue.
It's sort of, I wanted to get it across early as opposed to like the rest of the article is dealing with like the main sort of point. And so if I just get this out of the way, but I'm not sure if that's worse to do to put that up front or whether I shouldn't have included it at all. It's sort of like a point, but it's not. It's sort of, yeah.
Yeah, this paragraph I think is just interesting enough that it's reasonable to include it. Like it's not the most
Yep.
important thing, but it gives you a flavor of what's going on and what kind of problems there are. So it's
Also pretty
decent
short
content.
in the scheme of things.
Yeah, it's decent content in a reasonable word count, so it's efficient signal noise ratio. This
Yep.
sentence I don't like. I just don't think it's important enough. The first one is not great either, but it's a lot more understandable.
I initially had that as a list, and then the first paragraph was like one element of the list, and it sort of became obvious this is not a good list. So this section is actually, sort of started as something else, and I never went back and fixed stuff. So that first like line, there's no real need for that. It sort of is slightly descriptive. The last line is there that you don't like is there only because I wanted some way of like bridging into the next sort of sections.
The next section, yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's even necessary.
If you do want to do a bridge, make it more explicit, I think. So it's not saying the next section will discuss another issue or something like that. It doesn't specifically mention the next section here. It just says there's more stuff,
Yep.
and then you jump into the next section. So it's not a direct bridge. So the they are here is pretty unclear reference. It's hard to figure out what it refers to.
Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah. No, the oath or affirmation, they are, that doesn't, I mean, I could say, like, the words in particular are included, something like that, or,
Also, you have oath and affirmation, and then you have oath or affirmation.
yeah. The reason for that is that, like, the section concerns both, but I think I'm not positive, but I think parliamentarians only need to take one. But I initially, I did change one of them at one point. I think it was the second one, yeah. I could just delete that second sentence before the quote. I can just say they must take an oath or affirmation before sitting in Parliament, and then immediately just go straight to them.
This sentence itself, saying stuff is boring, so you're not going to include it, is itself boring and unnecessary.
I don't think I even need the she's represented by the Governor General. Like, I only put the second
Yeah,
sentence there
I
because,
wasn't sure if that was
like,
going
or the third.
somewhere.
No, I think that was more just time constraints, and so I typed some stuff and then, kept typing, something like that.
Common knowledge is another unnecessary thing. You can just say, instead of it's common knowledge that, you're making common knowledge the subject of the sentence and is the verb. It's better
The
to have Queen Elizabeth be the subject.
the reason I did that was to make it more explicit when talking about the idea of, because the Constitution mentions like under acknowledgement, and so it
Yeah,
yeah
I get your point. You can make that point as a modifier instead of the way you've structured it grammatically. So you can say, for
yep
example, Queen Elizabeth is the uncontroversial, universally acknowledged Australian head of state.
yep.
And then it better structures which things are more and less prominent in the sentence.
Is it so in that? So right now I've got like Queen Elizabeth II is Australia's head of state. If I said like is the uncontroversial or is uncontroversially and universally recognized as Australia's head of state,
Yeah.
is that better than saying like having a sentence afterwards where I say something like this fact is uncontroversial and universally recognized?
I think it's better because the modifiers aren't all that long or wordy. Your sentence hasn't gotten too cumbersome despite adding the modifiers. So it doesn't require splitting up into two sentences.
Yep. So in general, yeah, one sentence is sort of better, keeps the ideas close together.
Yeah, the modifiers don't require an entire additional sentence, just for a couple adjectives or
Yep.
adverbs.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So at this point, and maybe sooner, I would clarify to the reader what your point is. It seems like you're leading them through an argument. They're only going to find out what the point is at the end, so you're sort of giving them the pieces of evidence that build up to a conclusion. And it's easier for them to follow along if they know where you're going with it. This is improved because of the sentence that got added to the first paragraph earlier, but that was a
Yep.
while ago. So at this point, if not sooner, I would say that this clashes with the not supposed to have allegiance to a foreign power part of the Constitution. That's what the problem is.
Yep, which I haven't brought up for, it's been like 8 paragraphs or something.
Yeah, and down here you give the conclusion, but you're kind of assuming the reader remembers why this conclusion would be reached. I would mention again that because the law says they can't have that acknowledgement somewhere towards
Yeah,
the
because
end.
I can. So, well, on
Remind
the
them
end of
what each of the premises was that led to this conclusion.
so if like in the middle, at the end of the first sentence there, like to said foreign power, something, and then like semicolon something explicitly forbidden by Section 44. Like with that sort of thing.
Yeah, saying it was forbidden to have to. Yeah,
Or
that helps
it's not.
remind them.
It's sort of. I feel like maybe this is a. I mean, it's not as important in casual stuff, but like with legal documents, like it doesn't forbid them. It like declares that these people shall be incapable of blah sort of thing. And so the sort of difference between the ways that how it's sort of
Right.
phrased as like a
Or
double negative.
forbidden if you want to be an elected representative or something like that.
Yeah.
You could say as forbidden for parliamentarians by S44. Has ever done so legally is I know what you mean, but it's hard to follow.
So I could make the same point by saying, therefore, it's always been illegal, or it's never been possible for someone to sit in Parliament. I mean, legally that's sort of the thing. It's really the subject of the sentence is that it's been illegal to hold a seat of Parliament.
The clarity issue isn't legally; it's that done so is hard to know what the antecedent is.
Yeah. Okay.
It refers to sitting, but I found it a bit hard to figure out, so a lot of people will get confused there.
Um,
I think
I'm just
part of
trying to
why
think
it's
how to.
unclear is that sitting is an adjective, not a verb, but done so seems like it would refer to an action.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it gets like sitting is used as that like as a slightly differently when it comes to like holding office as well, as opposed to sitting in a seat.
Yeah. If you just replace
So
done so with sat, it's a little awkward, but it's clear, I think.
what if I said like no Parliament, or if I took out no sitting member of Parliament, because arguably members of Parliament who aren't sitting aren't actually members in terms of the British legal sort of term. Has ever, like if I went, has ever held office legally. Like, therefore, no member of Parliament has ever held office legally. That way it...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's clear. That's
clear.
nicer.
You have even instead of ever typo.
Oh, thank you.
Final notes.
This was just the stuff that I couldn't fit in the top and wanted to get down before we started the tutorial. So, obviously precedents would be significant. So I just wanted to mention that. And then I wanted to mention the weird thing with citizenship as well, because that's sort of fun.
Yeah. Okay, so overall, it had pretty good focus. You weren't trying to say a million different things, and you went through and gave a lot of info, and most of it was pretty clear. So I think someone would be able to understand what you were trying to say and see why it mattered. So what would a reader think when they read this? They'd say that was pretty interesting. It's a quirk, but maybe they would think it's pedantic and like word lawyering too much. And there's one thing you say about that, which is very relevant. It's the
second paragraph, yeah.
There was an actual thing in 2016 where there were problems with it.
Oh, yeah.
So it might be worth expanding on that a bit to tell people that this isn't just an ivory tower concern. You could like link to some info and give like one paragraph of info about what happened in 2016 and why it caused real problems. And you could say something like it's a lever for people to have political battles. Like it enables someone who's looking to attack their political opponents to have an excuse. You can use it as a if you're biased enough, you can use it. Even you can use technicalities against the opponent, so it's good to close them. To help reduce political infighting.
The other thing that occurs to me in terms of like paragraphs 2 and 3, where I say my interpretations could be considered outside the spirit of the law. So, firstly, I don't actually go into any interpretations very soon after that. I'm thinking it might be good to switch paragraphs 2 and 3, which then makes the stuff that I'm talking about, the clarity of the law, closer to the actual sort of quotes, brings the sort of relevant section and the idea about having actual effects sort of closer to the top. I mean, so if I say like my interpretations could be considered as outside the spirit of the law, that's maybe still a little too wordy, but it's better than before. Like people might think that, and so I sort of still want to have that there because, like, I want to acknowledge that these aren't necessarily arguments that could be actually, like, used in court to win a case, but they're sort of quirks and interesting and have real consequences too.
Yeah, whether they could win in court kind of depends on whether there's enough political bias, because sometimes ridiculous things win in court, and even completely untenable things. So like worse things have won in court than this.
Yep. Yep. You're a little bit quiet there, by the way. I'm not sure if I just wanted to
Oh,
mention.
I switched mics. I wasn't sure which one would be better. I'm. This is the iMac internal mic. I was on AirPods, so I'll just go back if the other one was better.
The other one was louder. That one doesn't sound too bad, but it's sort of hard to tell when it's soft. But it'll be easier, I think, the balance between stuff with Oh, I'm not sure if that actually changes the OBS stuff either
Oh,
in the
OBS is
Discord.
using the.
Oh,
Oh,
the good mic.
no, it's actually using the wrong one. I've been quiet the whole time. Now that I realize.
That was actually how I checked there. Was I was watching your thing over Skype to
All
see
right,
what the
testing, testing. Oh, now I'm pretty loud. Yeah, I'll turn that down a bit. Okay, a little more.
Yeah, that looks like it might be
Okay.
approximately similar between us.
Okay, any questions? Was that helpful?
Yeah, no, that was good. That was helpful. So that I don't think I've got any particular questions. I've just gone and pushed up the new version of that, so it should be live in a few seconds. Yeah, the only thing that I think is like a major, or not a major thing, sorry. No, I think that's pretty good. It's sort of nice that it's not because it's very like analytical as an article. It feels easier to write something that's clear or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the idea of the drafts, I put dates on them when they're like roughly ready to draft, which will also or ready to read, which also means that they'll be sorted in that order. So I'm not sure if I'll stick with that long term, but it seems like a good idea for the minute.
Okay, my first thought is that appearance is ambiguous between physical appearance and something like social perception from the group.
Mm-hmm. That's so yeah, so I asked some people for feedback on this before like posting it to FI. Partially because I wrote it late at night, and partially because I wanted to sort of get an idea of what the difference in feedback was, sort of thing.
I'm
Uh,
trying to find the first part where you clarify what type of appearance you mean. I'm skimming, and so far I'm not seeing it. So I think there's a
I'm not
significant
sure I
issue there.
do.
Okay.
Um, like I don't think I actually. I mean um the one thing that I do say, like in the third sentence, this works well for non-humans because looking good is hard to fake. So looking good is basically the closest I get to defining appearance. Um,
Oh, yeah, that's ambiguous though, because people talk about looking good or it's a bad look about social stuff rather than physical appearance.
yep.
So it's the same issue. So did you mean physical appearance?
Not exclusively. So
Oh, so you meant both?
yeah, I posted to or when I posted it to FI, I then like replied to my own topic with some like yeah, either it's not quite self-criticism, but like notes or things. And the first paragraph, like it does feel like there's so I'm not sure if it's how unclear it is in the scheme of everything, but I'm essentially like I'm using so I had honest indicator was sort of one of the things that I started with. And then I added like the genes thing later on, and I think that actually might make it less clear because later on I'm like through the rest of the article, I'm talking more about stuff like memes and ideas than I am about genes. So I've sort of introduced this metaphor, or not metaphor, but this term to start with, that people will take in different sort of ways.
Yeah.
But then I've sort of tried to make that a higher resolution sort of idea, which then I think has actually sort of harmed the thing overall. I don't know. It's yeah.
Okay, so you meant both. I'll just read it with that in mind.
Cool.
I think a lot of times people know that someone is lying or they're putting on a show or whatever, but it still matters. There are social rules for what you have plausible deniability about, like what you can say, oh, I wasn't trying to attack him, even if everyone knows you were.
Yeah.
There's rules for like what you can be accused of, and you have to admit it, and what you can just say, oh, I didn't mean it. You're just being overly aggressive with your mean interpretations. So there's significant room for dishonesty where everyone sort of knows it's dishonest, but they still have to respect it because it's the public discourse, and it's not challengeable even if they know it's dishonest.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, I mean, I guess that's part of the reason that like lying through their teeth is a phrase, as well as like, I mean, just thinking about British, like nobility in the 1800s, sort of, and the protocols around that, I feel like is yeah, an epitome of that sort of behavior.
Yeah, there's situations where you can get away with lying as long as the other person can't prove it, even if they're highly suspicious.
Yep.
Okay, so it quickly jumps to animals and evolution stuff. So this is a bit of a problem because it doesn't follow the topic sentence well. So we have a topic sentence that line is an honest indicator. So we're expecting the paragraph to relate to honesty. But then you switch to what animals and genes. So these seem like two different topics. So it's kind of an abrupt switch. This works well for non-human animals because looking good is hard to fake. Um, Actually, I would say there's a decent number of dishonest animal indicators, like peacock's tails. So I assume originally there was some sort of thing that the tail correlated with that was related to health or mate suitability or something. But
Mhm.
then they just evolved to fake it with like this bright plumage that's not in actual survival value. It's not entirely
So
fakeable because if you're like really unhealthy, then your tail falls apart. But I don't think it's like a good proxy for what it's supposed to be.
that's it's curious that you mentioned that because like I've heard like the peacock's tail particularly used as an example of an honest indicator in that so the disease is one aspect that if you are like if you have lice or things then as a peacock your tail looks less good. It's conspicuous so it's harder to stay away from predators. Um, uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But my point was that it's like a waste of resources. And I think I would assume that the origin was that females were looking for something, or males, I don't know which way it goes, but one species was looking for something that was functionally useful. So that it would make a father with better survival value. And then they
So
switched to this sort of waste of
oh
resources show.
so yeah the I think the there's a thing that's I think the term is something like runaway Fishery selection or whatever else where and that's the part where it sort of goes out of control and you get massive tails. I think the idea
Yeah.
about it being an honest indicator is that because it is a waste of resources, it means that this peacock is particularly good at surviving, in that you can't waste resources like this and have like bad genes. So it's not about your like directly whether you are more fit in
I think you
like a
can though
particular
at
way.
this point because sexual selection trumps other types of survival. You can be less fit and get a bunch of mates anyways because your tail is really good. Like you can sacrifice speed and agility and whatever and put those resources into the tail even if you shouldn't.
Yeah, okay.
It's like people who buy like sports cars or nice suits, possibly on credit or whatever, and they're looking very successful, but they're
Hmm.
actually in debt.
So yeah, okay. If we put aside whether the peacock's tail is or isn't an example, because that could like just be local stuff.
Yeah,
The uh the like the sports car or the suit is sort of what I'm. trying to get at more by the second or the last sentence, as in, like, to some extent it's hard to fake. I mean, if someone had like an asymmetric face, they might be able to, pay for plastic surgery or something like that to fix it, but that's pretty extreme and still not that common as far as I know. But like a suit or a nice car or things are much easier to fake. Even if, with the car it later gets repossessed or something like that.
Yeah, but
It's sort of,
animals evolve those traits that are sort of the equivalent of the car and suit, just over time, gradually. But I think they're still dishonest in a similar way.
so yeah, okay, maybe I'll make a note for later, so we can come back to it. I feel like paragraph 1 is pretty obviously at this point not clear enough, since we've spent so much time talking about it. But I'll make a note for figuring out what I should have said instead.
Yeah. Okay, so next thing. So you say honest indicator, and then you say appearance can be misleading. So this raises the question of indicator for what, which
Yep.
you have not explicitly said yet, which is pretty important. So, for example, social skill is often a dishonest indicator of like financial success or business skill, but an honest indicator of social skill itself. Like sometimes what you're actually looking for is, does this person have social skill? You can,
Mm.
you can judge the thing directly. So it depends what you're looking for. And social skill is in fact an indicator of success to a decent extent. Like it varies, but social skill is one of the ways to achieve success in the world. So it can be
Or
an
could
honest indicator that you have high social skills, which has led you to get a job as a manager or something.
or someone in like on a stage show in Vegas or something like that, which would obviously be
Yeah,
good. Yeah, yep.
right. If you want to be like an actor or a comedian, there are a variety of jobs where social skills are fairly prominent, as opposed to like a programmer job. If someone is showing off their social skills, that does not indicate they're actually a good programmer,
Yep.
mathematician, scientist. It can correlate though with successful in those things. Like some programmers really can't program, but they manage not to get fired anyways because of social skills. And this is more
Yep.
important with scientists because getting grants is more about social skill than merit, unfortunately.
Yep.
So a significant part, like doing the actual experiment, is about merit, and then but being able in a position to do the experiment requires social skills. So one of the things that happens is you get a professor with good social skills who gets some grad students who have merit, and then they team up.
Yep.
He
Um,
recruits people to do the thinking part for him, and then doesn't
it
give them
occurred.
enough credit.
Yeah. It occurs to me the like social skills have a fair amount of overlap with like communication as well, and there's like good things about that in the sense that if you're able to like better communicate your ideas as a scientist, that'll contribute more to your success, even if your ideas are of the same quality otherwise.
Yep, yeah, yeah. Social skills is a pretty big category, so there's better and worse ones.
Yep.
Um, the ones more towards just being able to actually communicate well are useful. Appearance fundamentally is data, and you have to come up with an explanation about what kind of person you're dealing with that fits the data. So it can help you to understand. When you say judging an idea's content above its source or appearance, it kind of makes it sound like you're weighting factors and you're giving a higher weight to the content.
Hmm.
Because I don't read above as meaning entirely exclude the other things and just 100% ignore them.
Yeah. It's not as I'm feeling like supersedes is maybe a word that's tighter there, but I don't know the right form of it to put into place. Um, But
Right, but if you're trying to do a comparison, then that's not focusing on decisive arguments. Different sources of
mm,
data are useful for different things. Um, what consequences they have depends on what criticisms you can create that refer to them and use them in some way. That's, by the
yeah,
way, the general thing for critical rationalism's approach to evidence is evidence is relevant if and when a critical explanation in particular says why that piece of evidence is relevant. Like when you have an argument that bridges the gap between the piece of evidence and some theory to reach a conclusion, then the evidence
yeah.
matters. So
I'm
you can't put a degree on how much that evidence matters. You can't say it matters more than other evidence in
it's
some clear way. It's just it does matter to particular arguments.
so yeah. This is actually contradictory to the later points in the argument. Uh, Whoops, sorry. Because essentially I go on to make a like an argument about why it's important to like have integrity and maintain that integrity. But if like I mean you'll see when we get there, but the idea is that like a good thinker should use our appearance to judge certain things about us, like particularly whether like to judge whether or not we have sacrificed integrity for the sake of our appearance requires taking into account like appearance, and it's not like that's a comparable thing to any other evidence they take in. They're all relevant to making that like decision because of the goal that they're trying to do. So to say that like ideas are always more important, um, yeah, I think actually is self-contradictory to a bit later on.
Okay. Well, this was an abrupt transition into flux.
Yeah.
Flux first
Um,
comes up in paragraph 3, mid-paragraph.
it's I think there are other drafts that were actually worse than that in terms of it was even later or more abrupt. It's I mentioned some of this in the self-criticism stuff. I'll see if I can bring up that email in the background.
A good place to start with claiming to be exceptional is some sort of proof of work or success or something with something else, like something that's easier to start with. Or if you don't have that, you can explain your background and say why, how and why you've developed the skill set to be able to do it. Or you can do both.
Yeah.
But politics in general is a bad place to start.
You're talking about the last sentence of paragraph 3?
It's not a specific sentence, it's just the
Okay, yeah.
content, like the general comments.
Yep.
One of the things that usually should come before politics, in my opinion, is political philosophy, like background and principles and stuff.
Yeah. So I was in the context of like where this article might appear if it was going to appear somewhere. It wouldn't be one of the first things. Like I sort of try to or I list some stuff for future topics at the bottom, and the first thing is actually what are the principles? Um, because I don't think it makes sense to talk about this before you talk about principles in terms of like if you had a book sort of thing. Um, Particularly
Uh-huh.
because whether you follow this or not is dependent on your principles. Like sort of an implicit principle in here is something to do with like integrity being valuable or whatever else. Sort of yeah, there's implicit stuff that's not explicitly sort of mentioned. Just while you read that, I'm just going to go to the bathroom for a tick.
Sure.
Okay, you're back.
Okay, so more detailed thing is principles appears for the first time here, not in a topic sentence, and it's treated as a keyword that is somehow linked to integrity. Like you sort of assume that integrity and having principles are synonymous without explaining that.
Yeah, so a friend of mine sort of pointed this out as well. The where was it? Oh wait, no, sorry. Sorry, I was just looking up that was definition of principle, not integrity. So I was on the fence about this because, like, the definition of integrity just on Google here is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. So I wasn't sure how, like, because it's such a tightly related idea, how much I should actually explain that or try to explain it in the article, because it's sort of like just restating a definition doesn't feel as good. But I do know what you mean in that it's a new word that has
Yeah,
particular meanings that yeah.
I think it's
Um,
an area where there's widespread confusion, and also integrity means more than having principles. It's a superset.
Yep.
Principles are just one of the things to do.
But yeah, because there's widespread confusion, like, I mean, yeah, one of the things, like, I feel like, so the general theme of this article, like, as in, like, we shouldn't sacrifice our principles for the sake of looking good type thing, either reputationally or physically, uh, like, that's a controversial idea in terms of people today, um, society, and particularly when it comes to politics.
Okay, and another main point is you suggest there's a clash between appearance and integrity, but you don't really explain that and say why you can't have both or why you'd be sacrificing one to the other.
Yep.
You suggest that appearance involves short-term rewards and honesty is connected to long-term rewards, but that's not explained.
Yeah. I sort of, yeah, I mean, that definitely feels a bit half uh, baked. The last post, or sorry, the last point in the some future things, what did I say? It was election cycles reward the dishonest because they are carrots on short sticks, but good democracy needs bigger carrots on long sticks, which is in and of itself like a bit unclear, but as like a note for me, I was okay with it. But that's sort of where that came from, or where what that idea is related to, in terms of short-term pressures and things.
Lots of appearance stuff is long-term. Like if you suffer reputational damage, it's hard to undo that.
Yep.
And
And it's sort of incentivizing the, like, if you were going to sacrifice some sort of principle for the sake of appearance for your long-term reputation, which might make sense, then it directly contradicts what I'm saying there.
yeah, so overall, this one seemed incomplete and not very structured, more like exploratory writing and trying to get your thoughts out, rather than something that's going to communicate very effectively with someone.
Yep. So my thoughts on it in general are that this, I think, is in like overall better than I typically have written in the past, in that for something I wrote late at night, uh, like because I couldn't sleep and I was thinking about things, I feel like it
Uh-huh.
sort of has come out okay. But as in it shows like well, maybe I just want to see this, but like it shows that I'm getting better at writing, at least in some regard. Um, but yeah, but this is I want like I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, so what you could do next is next time you write something, for every paragraph that you write, after you do an editing pass or whatever initially, make a tree for it in a similar way to how we've been analyzing text, and then see how well it holds together.
Yep.
So get it so you're reasonably satisfied with it by your normal methods, and then try that and see if it turns up any issues or opportunities.
Cool. No, I think that's a good idea. That's something I haven't done is like I'll go over editing and re-editing. Actually, so one thing that might be sort of interesting, I mentioned this in the post to FI. Do you mind if we have a brief look at the original one that I wrote?
Sure.
So I could find there was a few typos and stuff that I fixed, which probably is not that interesting to look at, but there was one sort of big thing where I changed I'm not going to history, where I changed a lot more about it. I think this was yeah, okay. So this was the one, just putting it in tutoring. Yep. So yeah, so that should give us a side-by-side view, so we can see sort of like the main points that I changed. I guess some of it, I don't know whether I actually improved it or not. Like the first paragraph is maybe a good example of this. And I feel like that's an issue. If I made changes and I don't know whether I improved them or not, then
Right.
presume
Do you know what, did you
I
have a
haven't done.
specific goal in mind for each change?
For these changes, so I think for most of them, yes. So some of them, so like the second paragraph there, I like is often misleading. I felt like wasn't. That's one of those like I could just say is misleading, but I didn't want to say that. So there was like this softening to like can be, and then linking to the second clause there because so this is actually maybe an interesting change because I've got like clause 1 and then clause 2 semicolon clause 3 as the first sort of paragraph, and then I've got clause 1 comma clause 2 and then clause 3 as a separate paragraph. So I've like pretty heavily changed the structure of that. So the best thinkers paragraph. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's
Okay, so in broad terms, for making changes, one of the ways to do it is to have a specific goal in mind. I have a criticism of the current version. I have some concept of what makes writing good that it's violating. My goal is to fix that. So then you make a change according to your goal, and then you check, did the change succeed at the goal? Then a different approach is to do it more based on your intuition. So you might have an intuition that there's something wrong with something or that some other way would be better, and it's harder to specify what the goal is or what the reason is. So in that case, what you can do is you can write it out both ways or more than two ways even. So you can try out your intuition, and then you can compare them and see if you have explicit or intuitive criticisms of either one.
Yep, that makes sense. I'm thinking as well that particularly when I'm like if I'm doing something like this, to actually like comment out why I'm making each change as I'm making it, maybe in like a separate doc or whatever. But so I can actually come back afterwards and try and read through it and see. Like I've got in this like first paragraph here, I've added an entire sentence. And some of the other stuff makes sense in terms of clarity of like, so like for example, in the paragraph on the left, I say other animals before I introduce the idea of humans. So changing other animals to non-human animals, sort of that I don't think is like bad in any particular way. It sort of makes it clear and introduces humans first. But then the sentence before that about using honest indicators to signal the quality of their genes. I mean, what I could have actually done is if I wanted to go down that road is to use it as an opportunity to introduce like memes as a part of like non-animal things, like organizations or something like that. And that would have been more relevant. But here it's sort of, I don't know if it actually adds to it at all. I don't know what I was doing besides being more explicit for the sake of being explicit.
Yeah, so a lot of editing and writing is a bit aimless, and if you're going to do that, it's often best to just leave it alone, unless there's a clear problem. Just accept that you weren't writing super high effort stuff and just call it good enough. So you can write like quickly and get some thoughts out and don't sweat the details. In the alternative, you can write in a more structured way or with some clear goals, and then that'll help guide you to know what to change and why to change it because you can relate it to is this text making the writing not work at some particular goal?
Yep.
Like if it's meant to be advertising copy, then that gives you context within which to optimize. Because now you know that you want it to not alienate the people who are going to see it and to grab their attention quickly and to make them aware of your product and so on.
Yeah,
Whereas if you're
that's
not writing for a particular purpose, it's much harder to optimize when you don't know what your goal is.
so for something like Flux, that's like maybe a good example, just in terms of like, so because we're like it's meant to be advertising copy in the sense that anything that people see is like potentially advertising. I mean,
Yeah.
the entire point of making a thing about appearance and integrity is like, sort of it's at least related to that. And then so I guess I don't know. There's a conflict sort of in the best advertising copy doesn't need to be honest, sort of thing. And I don't know the difficulty of finding balances between those things. But that comes back to like, what explanations do we have about what we're using it for, and finding better ideas about how to do it so that we don't have those conflicts. So that we go from like bad compromises to good compromises.
Yeah, I don't think looking at it as a matter of balancing the factors is a useful approach for getting an actual resolution. You need to try to figure out like in what ways dishonesty will actually sabotage something and lead to negative results, and then you won't want to use it in the marketing because you'll see it doesn't work. On the other hand, in the cases where it does work, You have to consider why you think it's dishonest and what's going on there and what the alternatives are in there. And there's some sort of error somewhere that can be found. You have to check your premises and don't accept that there can be contradictions in reality.
Yeah, that's
Like if you have a premise like integrity is always better, but then you also think that being dishonest is effective in certain cases, then you have a contradiction. If you
yeah,
accept that you shouldn't always have integrity, that it just works better not to, sometimes then you drop the contradiction, but that's a problematic view in some ways.
yeah. I guess it's one of the like the reason that I've thought about this is because like it's an idea that might not seem controversial sometimes, or it might seem obvious or things, but we like regularly, and particularly around elections, run into this sort of stuff, um, because there's some kind of short-term goal to chase for, um, and it's very like, and often it's like say whatever you can say to get more attention or get whatever else, because you don't get attention for like the things that, or we tend not to get attention for the things that we do want to say. Um, and the easy way to get more attention is to ignore all these other goals that we have, um,
Yeah.
essentially.
So if you're not getting attention for the things you do want to say, what I would look at first is why not? So it could be like a communication issue. Maybe you have to explain them better, lead with different points, relate it to your audience's understanding and situation better so they understand why it matters quicker and so on. That's one possible road you could go down. So you could fix your attention problem by improving your communication and your understanding of your audience and so on. On the other hand, there are other possibilities, such as maybe your audience has bigger problems. So you want to say some things and you see reasons that they're important and you see reasons that they're interesting and so on, and then no one's paying attention. Maybe you were communicating okay, it's just that people actually have other bigger problems. They might be correctly prioritizing other things. They could also be incorrectly prioritizing other things, and that would be something you'd need to realize that that's what's happening, and then you'd be able to address it.
So yeah, this last sort of point there, I feel like is um, a bit of an analogy to like the simplest sort of argument would be like error correction is important in people's lives, but they misprioritize things, and then error correction is an important part of like a democracy and policy formation, but it's also misprioritized. Um, like I see a lot of sort of parallels there. I'm not sure how strong, like how close that
Yeah,
relationship really
so
is.
you kind of have to look at what people's goals are. Most people aren't that involved in politics, so it's harder to accuse them of misprioritizing because most of their effort is going into other stuff that's more directly relevant to their lives. And then for the professional politicians and political commenters and so on, so they're putting significant effort into politics, so there's more of a role for error correction for them potentially. However, a lot of them, if you think about like what is their goal actually, it's often social climbing, power, authority, etc., not error correction. Like they want to entrench their own errors, which there's things wrong with that, but a method of uh, better error correction is not going to appeal to them right away because it doesn't fit with what they're trying to do. And in a sense, better error correction methods in government take away their power. They take away the opportunity for the rulers to be biased and play favorites and so on, which is why they wanted to have power in the first place, some of them.
Um, Arguably, without those sort of motives, you don't like people don't survive long in politics. Um,
Yeah, some don't.
in that
So,
you need like a lot more wealth or a lot more other stuff um, to stick around there. Otherwise, because it's like the ability for other people to do that to be more flexible means that they can acquire like sort of competitive resources in ways you can't, and then use them against you.
yeah, there's some difficulties there. There's a lot of underlying problems that are relevant.
Yep.
But so part of what Flux does in better governance in general, or intends to do, is to make it less relevant who's in power. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, the better the system is, the fairer the system, it matters less who the leaders are because they have less arbitrary control and they're just going through good methods like they're supposed to, and there's more transparency and so on. So, but when you make it less relevant who the leaders are, then people lose some of their motivation to become the leader. And so it clashes with a lot of the people who are professionally involved and they want power for their faction. Like their current goal is not to reduce the meaning of power and and the scope of power. It's to get power. So you're clashing with those people.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, no, I noticed, I'm not sure if I've, like, when I first read this, if I ever have read it, the Who Should Rule article on FI, or fallibilities.com.
Yeah. Who should rule is a Popper idea that's
Yeah.
similar to what I was saying. There's connections.
Um, I did have a question. Were all the, like, these dates at the bottom, they're all accurate, right? Like, I saw February 2010, I think December
Yeah.
2015.
That was when that was
Yeah.
published. Most of those, the bulk of the articles on the front page were published at the same time, and they were written within, several months before publication.
Yeah,
These
okay.
articles have a different date on them. They were all published on the same day.
Yeah, okay.
And again, they were written within a few months of that.
The only other
There
thing I
are
could see
some
were,
different ones though, like Paths Forward has a different date on it. TCS
oh, okay.
and Grammar have different dates.
So,
And
yeah,
the
obviously,
video is a different date. But yeah, this one, and this one I think are the additions. Maybe there's another one. No, maybe that's it.
um, yeah, okay, yeah. I was looking through briefly, but I couldn't see, it was hard to find examples. Like most of them were, the vast majority were sort of in a collection on the same, around the same date.
Yeah, I batch
Oh.
published those.
Um, yeah.
Okay, and then backing up a bit about writing. When you don't have a specific goal in mind, a lot of what happens is you write by intuition, and your intuitions are based on some sort of generic audience. You have some general purpose ideas about what is good writing, who might be reading your stuff, etc. So you end up writing for that instead of for a more specific audience. This is okay when it's more informal stuff, but it's harder to optimize when you just have these generic goals. They have decent reach, hopefully, so it works okay. But if you can be more specific, then it helps. It's when you focus on a few key issues, when you pick a specific context that lets you focus, which lets you decide this is a bottleneck to achieving my specific goal, and this other thing doesn't need to be optimized. It's not a key issue. So it lets you decide where to put your optimization and which things matter. If you don't have a specific context, you can't decide which things matter and which things don't matter. And there's too many things to just deal with everything.
Yeah, there's sort of there's a bit of an implicit argument in this article about like if I'm making a claim like the best thinkers know that appearance can be misleading, then there's sort of an implicit like I'm implying that this article has to be pretty good, sort of thing, in that if I uh yeah, I don't know, it's a bit soft. I'm having trouble putting my finger on it, but there's sort of an element of that. Like this is meant to be one of those articles that does appeal to better thinkers in terms of their evaluation of us or our ideas. I don't actually like even necessarily point out why we should, like, why as an organization we should care about better thinkers. There's sort of some if you've got more contextual knowledge, then there's maybe some reasons people could point out, but I don't say anything in this article about it. I think I added something down the bottom actually that might have. Yeah, no, this part sort of adds a little bit there, but it's not super great.
Yeah. Okay, so bigger picture. Did you finish the grammar article yet?
I haven't done a summary of the last part. I think there's
Have you
maybe
read
some
it?
bits that most of it, I think.
Okay, did you have any questions or issues with it?
None that come to mind. I probably need to sit down and actually like closely read it to come up with any. I feel like we've covered a lot of it in different stuff.
Yeah. Okay,
Like
well, I think overall it would be pretty important to continue with the grammar stuff. So there's the comma article at the bottom is just a short little one, but I think that's worth a read.
oh yeah,
And yeah,
I did.
people have a lot of issues knowing where commas were, so I figured out the main ways they're used.
I think yeah, I saw Alyssa's been doing some, or some of the stuff she's posted has been about using commas. One of the exercises was about that particularly. I loaded that up the other day, but then didn't actually do it. But I might try, yeah, that and then reading through this and then doing it again. Maybe if I get some of them wrong. Yeah, I haven't really tried to judge my like as in I'm tempted to say something like I have a good intuition around using commas, but I don't have any way to really judge that explicitly. So that's, yeah, I think I need to work on.
Okay, and then after that, I'd like to get to the grammar and text analysis gumroad. So it'll
Yep.
have some review of the grammar concepts and then start moving into text analysis, including some bridging material where it's using grammar stuff to help with analysis. I
Yep.
think that's an important thing to keep working on.
Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I'm sort of I feel like I have a tendency maybe to, and I think, a lot of people do, to sort of jump ahead too quickly without mastering things. Um, like, oh, I get the idea, let's keep going, as opposed
Yeah,
to, yeah, actually doing enough of the hard yards as such.
yeah.
Um,
Going
my,
through Peacock's course might be worthwhile as a way to get extra practice as well.
yep. I think there's like, is it, I might be misremembering, but there's like 18 hours of audio or something like that. Is that,
Um, yeah, I think it's around there.
yeah, okay.
Some of them are more important than others. You could be selective if you wanted to.
Do you reckon go through your stuff before his?
Yes.
Like, yeah, this is more useful. Cool. Yep.
But yeah, his stuff's pretty good and it's also more standard. So it'll help your ability to communicate with other people who have more mainstream grammar education.
Yep. I think it's or at least I want to try and get like I don't know, our flavor of more principled grammar down first, sort of thing, if I can call it that.
Yeah.
Um, like I
I
like yeah, the principle.
yeah, I found Peacock's thing. It's sort of billed as introductory, I think. But I found it goes through a lot of stuff quite quickly, like most of the parts of speech. So I think it's actually better if you've already studied grammar a bit and you already know half of what he's talking about, and then it's easier to follow.
Yep. I'm not sure. I mean, he looks like his, you know, had a few decades under his belt as such. I wonder if there's like hangovers from the way that grammar used to be taught, because I know that it's watered down a lot now in terms of English
Yeah,
education.
I think there is. I think he expects too much from people's educations and how much grammar they've gotten in school already, and he's trying to build on that to some extent and review it rather than explain everything from the beginning. Like you never got taught any grammar in school, which is a more common modern situation. The lectures might be like several decades old. I don't know if there's a date on them. Some of his stuff has dates and some doesn't. Sometimes if you click through to the ARI page, it has the date there instead.
Is that Oh yeah, ordered from blah. Um, Not sure if this looks like the same store that it was before, I think. So I'm not sure when they're doing the thing. Yeah, there we go. 19 hours a minute of thing.
I don't know
Um,
about their upgrade or whatever.
but yeah, I'm not sure. This is no, okay. Oh, I've just gone and doxed myself. That's all right.
Anyway, just you can get practice in a lot of ways, like find things online or just practice with sentences you read that you run into. And sometimes found she had a hard time with some concept, so then she looked it up in the dictionary, and the dictionary had a bunch of examples, and then she tried to analyze all of those. She did that with a couple of things.
Oh, I found the
But
tickets.
once you get a good foundation on grammar, then you can analyze specific cases as they come up. You're in a better position to fill in the gaps as you go along because it doesn't take
Y
so long anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, all right. So sort of a bit hesitant to spend too much time on trying to write stuff because I feel like we've sort of got a lot of points from this last one
Yep,
that I probably need to review and things. Should we go through any of my my little list of stuff that I started collecting as a
sure.
if I can find where it was. I think it's here. Yeah, okay. Um, so this was a uh, this was in response to um, a guy posted an issue to the Flux constitutional stuff, um,
Okay.
and I sort of I've mentioned here that I've like added considerable length, and then that it also took an hour, and that I don't think it was a great use of time. Sort of as ways to reflect on it. His
Yeah,
uh,
that adding length reminds me of design by committee, where you got a lot of different people from different perspectives, and they each want things added. And then if you add all of them, it ends up too long.
yep. Um, so some of his stuff is like not related to the PR, like in terms of AGM dates, the title, and then some of it is yeah. So I've sort of like provided comments and various things about that, but in terms
Yeah,
of the
the one of the things you can do in general is if you state the goal for a particular thing, then when you get feedback, you can say, I don't need to make a change because this feedback does not say why I'm failing at the goal. Please phrase your feedback in terms of reasons it will not live up to its goal. Otherwise, it doesn't need a change. Or you can also
yeah
give feedback on the goal itself, like the goal should be changed. But if you make feedback go into those two categories, why it's failing at its goal or why the goal should be changed, then I think it'll help a lot with people's what they do is sort of like degree arguments in the positive direction. It would be nice if it had this info or something. And they're just like, all these features would be nice. We could raise in the college rankings if our college had XYZ, because you got more points for more things. So I think a lot of feedback is a bit like that, and that causes loss of focus.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you can see like here how long it was before. Oh, I can't easily select it, but does this? Okay, yeah. So I can more easily measure the word count, but I think it's probably like on the order of like 4 times more.
Yep.
The first one had 124 words, and then 409 words. So yeah, so a little over 3x. Oops.
The other
Yeah,
issue you
and that's
mentioned with use of time. So dealing with ways that stuff fails at a goal is in general a good use of time, so that helps. But there are different ways to deal with it. So you can delegate it, you can refer to why an issue is already addressed in your library of criticism. You can try in general to make reusable, like FAQ answers. So if you find you're repeating the same things multiple times, that's a bad use of time, but you can make reusable material to fix that.
yeah. We do have an FAQ, but it's fairly like we set it up, or most of it was written in 2016 to answer particular questions we were getting at that point in time. And it's become like I don't think I'm not sure even if anyone points anyone to it anymore. But one of the sort of goals that I have thinking about like what to do or well practicing writing, like why I want to get better at practicing writing, at writing is to start building out some of these things that I've wanted to write like for Flux, and particularly like what we've been talking about has made things a lot clearer, like things like a library of criticism, and goals, and making some of the goals that we've had that have previously been implicit, explicit, stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm not sure we need to talk much more about this. The
Yeah.
only other thing that I'd mention is
With use of time also, you can
mhm.
explicitly ask people, why is this important? Why is this worth my time? That's like stuff along those lines. Um, or you can present to them the problem that you're very busy and ask if there's any particular reason that this thing should be highly prioritized that you're missing. Like say you don't quite see why it should be at the top of your priority list, but you wanted to give them the opportunity to tell you if there is a reason so you can consider it. And that'll
Yeah,
get you better info. And also it'll make them feel like heard and considered and stuff, even when you're not giving some of them much attention.
yeah,
And those are things you can say without much effort. It's like quick.
mm.
And it puts a
I
bit
mean,
more of the burden in their court. Like they have to explain why it's important instead of you thinking about it and deciding how important it is. Like let them make that case for you if you want to save time.
yeah. So I'm not actually sure if I pointed it out in the discussion that I posted with this guy, but I did like one thing that did occur to me was that no one's ever brought this up as an issue before, and we've had an AGM every year, or for every calendar year rather, and there's been notifications and things like that, and no one's ever been like angry that the notifications weren't good enough or whatever else. So I don't think there's actually any problem that this is solving right now, besides stuff like it's not clear enough, but that's a degree argument as well. And you can always say that things aren't clear enough, but it doesn't mean that
Hmm.
they're not able to do the thing. Um,
Right. Yeah.
one of
So
the
you could just
reasons,
respond to him and say like, no one else has had this problem for years. Can anyone else respond in this thread if they did have this problem and I don't know? If not, then it's probably not a high priority because it's not a common problem.
yeah. The other thing
And if you
is,
do that, you'll occasionally get other people chime in and say they did have the problem. So it could get useful feedback. It gives the opportunity.
um, yeah, there is. I did try and like this is quite a reasonably old change. I think now, yeah, last change to this file was 13 months ago, uh, but yeah, I think there is there's something about like making PRs, and sort of trying to put the burden of the work on the person making the suggestion. Like if they have a criticism, presumably they should be able to give us a pretty good idea of why we're not currently living up to some goal or something, and they should be able to at least like draft something that solves that. I feel like is a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, if you get high enough volume, you can make a standard format and ask them to use that. But that will annoy people in lower volume of comments. So
Mm.
it's usually a better idea when you have a lot of comments anyways, so you don't mind losing some. Whereas when you're a smaller group, you don't want to put as much barriers to entry.
Yeah, there's another side that we sort of struggle with a bit, which is that as like being a smaller group, there's only a few people who are highly dedicated and like consistently spend a decent amount of time on things. Um, and so our time is fairly constrained as well. And so there's this balance between like low barrier to entry and then quality of like stuff coming in. Um, yeah, that's sort of, I'm not sure about if there's like general, well, we've come up with various tactics for dealing with that over time. But I mean, we don't really have a problem with that at the moment in terms of like, well, I don't know, maybe we do have a problem with the barrier being too high, which is why we don't have certain amounts of participation or whatever else. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, even using GitHub at all is a significant barrier to entry for a lot of people, I think.
I've sort of been surprised by that in the sense that like registering an account is pretty easy, and with most files, I mean, as you get into things like the diffs and stuff, it can get a bit more complicated. Um, but like if I go to a random file, like there is just an edit button there which you can,
Uh-huh. So do you mean you're
yeah,
surprised by how much of a trouble it is for people?
yeah,
You think it's easy, but they find it harder? So some
um,
context on that is like people find it too difficult to like remember their passwords or write them down or whatever. Like they're really bad at computer and software use. A lot of people are scared of installing apps. Um,
hmm.
so I think, yeah, thinking GitHub would be easy for most people is not a mainstream perspective. It's more of a programmer perspective, like from in programmer culture, it's not very hard to use, sure.
But yeah, no, it's been a blocker for us in the past. Um, but then the other like stuff like trying to use WordPress instead of Markdown for doing web page stuff. Um, like there's then like a significant amount of downsides there that uh people like the more effort for stuff like WordPress, more effort is made in terms of um making it easy for people to do small edits and stuff. Like um, you create an account, you log in, and then you've got like a WYSIWYG editor.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I hate those. I would definitely look for something that uses Markdown.
um, yeah, it's then. I mean, I've looked at a few years ago. I looked at sort of there were a few products that seemed like. I mean, they're all SaaS products, which is part of the problem, um, because there's a big problem like with limited funds. SaaS products are like a big liability because if you become dependent on them, I mean, so we spend like $450 a month on email stuff like Mailchimp plus email accounts, um, for example, and it's like a pretty big drain on our finances, um,
Yeah.
which you know, yeah, there's those sort of problems. And so balancing, yeah, anyway, there's a lot of equilibrium type stuff there. Um, in terms of we could make it easier, that would change our costs. Would that then, reflect in changing participation or things? And it's hard to know in advance. But yeah,
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of other options, like if you just make a subreddit and people can give their feedback there. Some people would prefer that, or some people prefer Discord or whatever.
yeah, we have a Discord that seems pretty active in the scheme of things at the moment. It's probably our most active sort of social media thing that we've had, which has been good. Um, anyway, um, maybe we should move on to these other 2 points here. Hopefully, the
Sure.
first one here gets like we can. I think it's a fairly quick sort of question. So I was listening to
Okay.
this podcast that you had the other day. I'll just put it in thingy. Um, so I think it's 10 minutes or so. You were talking about yeah, meme misconceptions. Um, and at about 3 minutes in, I think it is, I think you mentioned basically that like David Deutsch and his fans are the only people who take the idea of memes seriously, and uh, I was wondering what you thought about Richard Dawkins, because presumably he came up with the idea, as far as I know.
Well, he coined the
Did
term
he?
and he mentioned there was a connection there, but I'm not aware of any serious work analyzing memes substantively from him. I haven't
Okay,
looked
so he
that
sort of
hard,
like,
but
yeah, okay. I'm not aware of any particular advancements in it. Like, it seems to have just become like a thing that academics refer to seem trendy or type thing. Like,
yeah, a lot of it is people are just like, ooh, mind viruses, or ooh, internet memes. Susan Blackmore wrote a book, but it's bad and she's dumb. She thinks technology memes, teams, are like another category of replicator. So
is
she
that
doesn't
just
really understand replicator categories.
like that they just have a more explicit instantiation, as in like von Neumann machines type thing, or
I forget offhand very much, but yeah, she thought she discovered another replicator, a team, and it's just sort of a subcategory, a type of idea, and I don't think she knows
yeah,
what she's talking about.
fair enough.
And David read her book and did not think it was good.
Yep. Um, Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know anything else that Dawkins has done on memes besides sort of mentioning that these might exist. Um,
Yeah,
but
so
yeah,
DD does actual apply the principles of evolution and use them to help analyze memes. And Dawkins is capable of doing that because he understands the evolution aspect, but I don't think he's done very much of it. And then most people are not even capable because they don't understand theory of evolution very well.
hmm,
So most stuff is
that
really quite superficial.
yeah, no, I noticed people making a lot of mistakes around uh like like not understanding that genes are the things that evolution favors as opposed to the animals.
Right, yeah.
Like that's a common source of um, but yeah.
Yep, and
Anyway,
there's group selection and Lamarckism and stuff are pretty common.
yeah. I feel like people have definitely taken Lamarckianism as like a metaphor they use to explain other stuff. Like they've come up with a shortcut for understanding evolution or something like that, and then uh, they just apply that to everything else that whenever they see something that fits this pattern, they sort of, yeah, apply these other stuffs, and end up compounding errors. But anyway, yeah, no, that's fair enough. The last thing on the list, maybe for the last 12 minutes, because it's probably better to talk about. Um, yeah,
Okay.
ideas about motivation and feeling bad and stuff like that. Like yesterday was sort of a day where I ended up going to sleep again pretty early, but I sort of, yeah, got into this state of uh I don't know, like not feeling very good about anything. It wasn't that there seemed like there was any particular problem, just that nothing was particularly worth sort of doing or spending time on, or that sort of,
There's various charts like this that might have some relevance because a lot of what happens with people with FI is um, they're here. I'm so great. I've read BOI and I know all this stuff and I'm super confident and I can do all this great stuff and so on. And then they have a bit of a crash when they get a bunch of criticism, which can actually put them below where they started. Sometimes
hmm,
people end up less confident than before they even entered the field because before they enter the field they think I can learn this, like I haven't started yet but I could do it. That's like right here. But after people get a lot of criticism and it can destroy their confidence where they really feel like it's so much harder than I realized that this is like beyond me or it would take
sort of the
years or
overwhelming.
yeah. So there can be a bit of a major confidence crash, potentially more than the graph. And that is one of the problems people have. I don't know if that's your problem.
I've definitely had that problem or similar like type stuff in the past. Like where I have felt sort of more overwhelmed. Or like yeah, I'm not sure if it was a problem like yesterday. One thing that has been like that has come up a few times over the past few years is the like interacting. So as in like the perception of like the quality of time you spend with other people going down as you get more ideas or get better at or maybe just like localized practice, as in like transitioning from something where you've been thinking
Yeah,
like to then yeah.
it's really common if you were making some progress to find things get worse over time with people because most people don't make much progress. So they start getting repetitive for you if you're actually learning things and they're not. They don't keep up with your progress is a different way to look at it. Like you sort
Mm.
of have these friends and maybe family and so on, and you're like, ooh, I'm gonna learn stuff, and they'll learn stuff, and we'll all get better together. And then what actually happens usually is most of them make significantly less progress than whoever is making the most progress. Like if anyone actually makes much progress, that's unusual, and most people aren't going to keep up.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day about like family and particularly like how things might change over time in terms of our like or familial relationships. Um like whether I should like stop talking about certain things and then questions of like does that then reduce the quality of time or like reduce the quality of the relationship overall? Um or yeah, like
Family
I
stuff,
could
well, so with family, there's chosen family and like unchosen family. And with the unchosen family, you usually don't want to have really like intellectual goals with them, because it's not realistic for these specific people that you didn't go select out of the larger population to like mesh with you intellectually especially well. Like you'll get like some chemistry because you know each other well, but you shouldn't have like really high expectations. If you want like a philosopher buddy, go find someone else and then have different expectations for what you're going to get out of family relationships.
hmm, um yeah.
It's different with chosen family though. Like if you get a wife, you want to choose someone that you're more intellectually compatible with. But if it's like a brother or a parent or an uncle or something, then you don't get a choice.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, the family stuff feels like a bit of a middle ground in that I have a reasonably high opinion of my family. And I think we've like all of us have worked to do better things, like to not make a lot of mistakes that people tend to do, um, with those sort of relationships. Um, yeah, I don't know. Things are a bit unclear in my head still though.
There's value in family, even if they're not like high tier philosophers or something. If you can just get along with them and they're reasonable, it's good to be able to have people in your life that you can do activities with, get along with, um, rather than just being like really alone and isolated.
Yeah. Um, oh, I was just yeah, one idea that came to me was the like the traditional knowledge of like don't talk about politics at the dinner table type thing.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, it sort of makes more sense in the context of what we've just been talking about, as to why that would be the case. I've sort of taken the opposite view in the past of like, um, I don't know, I guess more in line with the like, it's better to, like, we should be making like moral judgments or whatever else, or like be interested in these things, or, um, but I guess there's this idea of when you should do that, and I don't have a good sense of when. Um,
yeah. You can
I,
be looking for other values from family, similar to work. Like if you have a software job, you don't need to bring politics up with your software coworkers. You're, you have a joint project and you're doing something else, and that's productive, and you can leave politics out of it. It's the same with family.
Yeah, it's actually sort of occurs to me that there's a bit of this like same sort of stuff with Flux in the sense that like there's a lot of things I believe about the world that are because of like reading BOI and participating in FI and stuff like that. That while I think that like the core of the ideas behind like Flux and IBDD are like aligned with BOI and FI, there's it's only some of that that we should bring up in the sense that like it would compromise, like, you know, if our goal is to make democracy better and presuming that we have a good way of doing that, then it can be harmful to bring up other things that are maybe implied by what we believe, but that other people disagree with because they can agree with the democratic stuff, but not some of the implications. There was a lot of
Yeah,
stuff that I just said
if
there.
you can find limited chunks that are make good modules and stand on their
Mm,
own, they have good independence, that can work okay. With politics in general, I think that's pretty problematic because the overall world situation is people need more philosophical education. They're not in a good position to think clearly about complicated things. They're missing background knowledge and prerequisites to
mm.
understand something like Flux. So even if you made it a self-contained module, you'd be building on things like sort of assuming schools worked so that they were competent thinkers, and then you build on top of that. But it wouldn't be self-contained like from zero. It'd be self-contained from what a high school education should be, But in a
Yeah.
world where people don't actually have that because the schools are so bad, it's harder to separate.
So I'm just thinking about like I've come up with all these like topics or things like that for like articles to write about Flux, and a lot of them are like I'm trying not to go too basic with stuff, but a lot of them are uh some of those sort of things. Like um I mean I don't yeah, I don't know where um drawing the line is hard as such in terms of like fundamentals versus new ideas, maybe. Um
hmm
yeah, I don't know. I've tried to keep that is yeah.
Broadly, I think political innovation is not the world's bottleneck, basically, not the most urgent problem to optimize.
Hmm.
And also, with this kind of stuff, you're going to run into a lot of the same problems that FI has had, where it's the kind of stuff people think is clever, and they like talking about it. They feel like smart and like they're talking about interesting things. It's very similar to people reading pop science books, and they don't actually understand much of what they're talking about. They like overreaching. They like talking about sophisticated things, even at the cost of not really understanding what they're talking about. So you're gonna get a lot of people who read the articles and say this was interesting and clever and sophisticated and I liked it and I understand it, but they actually don't. You're gonna get a lot of like cargo cultures and false followers and stuff,
Hmm.
because
Which
that's sort of the world situation that most people don't understand those kinds of things well, actually.
yeah, there is this I don't know, I feel like maybe it's a recurring sort of thing that comes up particularly with politics, but as like because there's sort of this like one school of thought is that like it's better to mislead people to like vote for something good for the wrong reason or to support something good for the wrong reason. Um,
Yeah, I
I
try
feel
to
like
stay out of that kind of short-termism where it's like focusing on what happens in the next election. Because the point of tricking people into voting for the good thing is you're trying to get the good thing voted into power sooner, rather than in the long run eventually. And my view is there's way too much of that short-termism, and it's more important to figure out the root causes and try to do something about those. And people have
hmm,
neglected that for, centuries, and then here we are, and the root causes still need fixing.
yeah,
I mean, not entirely neglected, but, not really fixed yet.
it's definitely not been like yeah, massive priority. Um, I mean, people don't agree on the root causes a lot of the time, which definitely doesn't help.
Yeah, but there's scope to figure out how do we analyze those, how do we create agreement about those things? How can we get non-refuted ideas and organize it so that it makes sense for all the reasonable people? And there's steps you can take along those lines.
Yeah, yep. Um, okay, so before next time, I'm probably I haven't done much grammar stuff, and I felt a bit of hesitancy with the writing. Like I didn't do as much as I wanted to over the past few days. So I might prioritize, make sure I understand the last bits of the grammar article, and then probably start on the Gumroad stuff.
Okay. Yeah,
Does that sound? Yeah,
I think that would be
it
good.
feels pretty reasonable. Cool. Okay. Cool. I'll yeah, see you next week.
Okay, bye.
Ciao.